Hi everyone, I am Marian Leary and I will be talking with you today about using design thinking to create nurse-led innovations. Just for some background, I am the Director of Innovation at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing, also on the Innovation Advisory Committee for the American Nurses Association, and a founding member and on the Board of Directors of SUNCL, Society of Nurse Scientists, Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Leaders. And of course, I am one of the co-organizers of the Nurse Hack for Health. I will be talking with you today about a project that I created through a grant through the Reed and Alex Hillman Foundation, focusing on nursing innovation and design thinking. All right, so let's set the stage. What is innovation? Well, at Penn Nursing, we define innovation as the application or creation of something new or the use of something in a different way that delivers value. Is the solving of pressing problems using rigorous methodological approaches infused with creativity and risk-taking. Though technologies and widgets can be a part of innovation, it is not solely the only thing that is innovative. And so it is really the methods that we use to solve problems, the processes and systems we create, and the way that we communicate with our patients, families, and communities at large. All of these things embrace the innovation process: clinical, social, technological, communication, and educational. All these things can be and are innovative and innovations if created in the right way. So then the next logical question, what is design thinking? Because that's why you're all here, right? So design thinking is a 5-step process that is human-centered in nature. It focuses on the people who the problem affects. And it is looking at the needs of the people through that lens. So it is a iterative process that starts with empathy and goes to define, ideate, prototype, and test. And the whole time you're going back and forth through each of these phases, always keeping in mind the people who you're creating solutions for and hopefully with. And though the design thinking process seems different than what we do in the profession of nursing, I guarantee you it is almost the same exact thing. So if you look at the design thinking process here, and I'm going to go into each of these phases in much more detail in a minute, but it starts with empathy, then moves on to define, ideate, prototype, and test. Well, it matches very nicely what we all know as the nursing process, where you're going to assess the patient to understand the problem. You're going to then determine the problem and define it so that you can start to make a plan and create a solution to address that problem. You're going to then intervene with that solution and then evaluate what you've done. And then you go back and you reassess and make sure the plan worked, and you iterate and change it as needed. This matches very nicely with the design thinking process. We created what we have as our Design Thinking for Health platform, which is an open access curriculum that targets nurses who want to learn about innovation and design thinking. You can go on this site and use it. It is free, open access, and we created it in partnership with the Reed and Alex Hillman Foundation. It includes 4 documentary videos of nurse innovators from around the country, as well as 6 lecture videos and 10 podcast videos from nursing innovation and design experts, as well as a number of established resources from design thinking firms, including design thinking activities, which you'll see that we use throughout the entire design thinking phases. I like to really show how the design thinking process works using case studies. And so I'm going to use a case study from one of our student groups at Penn Nursing. I teach a course called Innovation in Health, Foundations of Design Thinking, which is an interdisciplinary course for students across campus to learn about design thinking and how you can use this process to improve health and healthcare. Like I mentioned earlier, the first step of design thinking is the empathy phase. This is really one of the most important phases of design thinking. It's where you're going out and you're really gaining a deeper understanding of the people and the populations that you're designing a solution for. So we're not going out as researchers, clinicians, providers, whomever, and telling people what we think their problem is. We're really allowing the people to show us and tell us what they know their problem is so that we can accurately define the problem and create a solution that best meets their needs. And again, for this to be a human-centered process, we really do want to co-collaborate with the people who are our stakeholders throughout the entire process. Like I mentioned, there are a number of standard design thinking activities that exist throughout this presentation. You'll see I'm going to put the logos of all the activities below so that you know where I've pulled them from. The first part of the empathy phase is to really define your audience. Many people and populations have the same problem, but the solution you create isn't going to address the problem for all of these people. And so you really want to understand who your audience is so that you can accurately interview, observe, and gain the knowledge you need to define the problem and create the right solution for that population or person. The Flex C group, they were focusing on young millennials who had irritable bowel disease. And so during the empathy phase, you go out and you interview and you observe the people who are experiencing this problem. You put yourself in the context of where the problem is taking place. So you get a richer, fuller understanding of that problem. During the observation phase, you can really see what else is going on that affects the individuals and that enhances the problem. You take all that information that you gathered from the empathy phase and you put it all together using something called an empathy map. So you put your user in the center here and you pull out what they said, what they thought, what they did, and what they felt. And all that information comes from those interviews and observations you're doing with your key stakeholders during this phase. And all that helps you to then put together a richer problem statement. So during the define phase, you're taking that information and you're understanding the problem from the point of view of the people who are experiencing that problem. And the one way you can start to really put a broader picture together is using something called a journey map. So now you have your person, your user at the center. You want to understand their different pain points during a particular part of their day or their month or their year, depending on what the problem is and when it takes place and for how long it takes place. So for the Flex C group, they were looking at young millennials who were having issues just during the day. So when they left their house before work. And so they plotted out the young millennial leaves their house, say they're taking their dog for a walk. They go out to take their dog for a walk and they feel like a bowel accident is coming on and they're trying to then locate a bathroom that is safe, clean, and accessible. So they walk through that young millennial's day, laying out all these different points. Again, just to fully understand what the problem is so that they can accurately define it. And they do that using something called a problem statement worksheet. So on this problem statement worksheet, there's a little template that says, I am, user description, I am trying to, goal or outcome, but, problem or barrier, because, root cause, which makes me feel emotion. They're able to accurately fill this out now because they have interviewed and observed many young millennials and can pull all of those data to put together an actual problem statement from their point of view. And their problem statement included, I am an individual battling the challenges of inflammatory bowel disease. I'm trying to maintain an active and social lifestyle, but bowel accidents sometimes follow me outside of the home because spaces are not designed to meet my needs, which makes me feel embarrassed, isolated, and vulnerable. As design thinking practitioners, we would then go back to our stakeholders and make sure that we are accurately defining the problem based on the interviews and observations of those stakeholders. Then we would move on to the ideation phase. So this is where you're going to start brainstorming and coming up with solutions to the problem that you've just defined. It's during this phase I tell all of my students, don't worry about any constraints. Don't worry about financial constraints. Don't worry about physics. Just put as many ideas on paper as you can think of. And to start doing that, they start brainstorming. And I have all of the individuals in a team brainstorm separately. So they all write down as many ideas as they can think of to solve this problem. And then they come back together and they bundle their ideas and they start to look for themes and patterns that emerge that could potentially solve this problem. I give them an activity called It's Like, It's Not Like, so that they can think about what else exists out in the world that could potentially solve the problem. So for example, I had a team focusing on how to improve meal delivery services in the in-hospital setting. So they used the It's Like, It's Not Like activity to think about what else exists in different sectors that, again, could address this problem. So for example, Uber Eats. Could they think about the problem of in-hospital food delivery service like Uber Eats, where if a person in a hospital orders food on an app, they can see when it's being prepared, when it's being delivered, and when it has been delivered so that they can schedule their hospital activities around the meal delivery. Not every innovation has to be something completely brand new. The whole idea here is that you can see what's out being used in other sectors that could potentially address your issue as well, and try to incorporate it and adapt it so that it addresses your problem. I also tell everyone who uses design thinking to get visual. Writing notes on a sticky note is fine, but you want to really be able to see something in a different way. It helps to really draw things out. So I encourage everybody to be as creative as possible. Even if you think you're not creative, I promise you, you are. You just have to put pen to paper and start doodling and drawing it out as best you can. All right, and then that leads us to the prototype phase. So this is where you start to build out a low fidelity prototype of what your solution is potentially going to look like and act like. These low fidelity prototypes are really exactly what they sound like. They're prototypes made out of art supplies, if it's a product, or existing materials that you could edit to look like what you need it to be. If it's a web application or an app that you're creating, there are programs online that help you create fake front ends or to create low fidelity websites or apps as well that people can then test to make sure that they're working to address the problem that you've defined. So for the Flexi group, they created a solution of undergarments that had two shells, one that was disposable and one that was reusable. These inner shell, if the young millennial had a bowel accident, could be taken off and disposed of, and this outer shell could be reused. And they worked with our materials library at Penn and found actual material that was both water resistant and odor resistant that they could incorporate into their solution. The next phase after you create your prototype is to test it out. And you really should be, again, testing it out with the population who the problem is affecting to make sure that it's addressing their needs. In the class, I just have the students test it out with other students because we don't have the time or bandwidth to be able to go out and have them test it with the actual population. But it is a good exercise on what you really need to keep in mind when you're prototyping a solution. So this team created bao out of chocolate pudding and had students test to make sure that the prototype could be taken on and off, that the outer shell worked correctly, and that the different materials were absorbent. During this testing phase, you use other activity sheets such as this one, I like, I wish, what if, so that of the people who are testing your prototype, you can write down what they liked, what they wish it did, and ideas that they came up with. Well, what if it did something else? And you use a feedback capture grid to start putting all of these ideas together. So the likes, the criticisms, the questions, and ideas. So then you can go back and iterate your prototype. This first low fidelity prototype is not going to be what the end product is. You're going to take all of this feedback and you're going to enhance it and make it better so that it addresses the needs of your stakeholder. At the end of the class, I have the students do a pitch presentation. You are going to be doing a pitch presentation as well. A lot of design thinking is about storytelling, and so being able to put together a really comprehensive story of the problem and the solution and how you got there. The class that I teach is an interdisciplinary class of students across Penn. This team, the Flexi team, just happened to be all 4 nursing students who did an incredibly creative job and really embraced the design thinking process. So if you want to learn more about design thinking, all of these resources and many more are on the Design Thinking for Health website, which is designthinkingforhealth.org. You can watch, read, and listen and go through a plethora of design thinking activities that, again, I really hope you do consider using over the course of the Nurse Hack for Health. If you want to learn more about nursing innovation and design thinking, you can sign up for our Design Thinking for Health newsletter. I promise you, I don't send this out nearly as much as I should, so you won't be getting that many emails from us. But it definitely will keep you up to date when we have new information, new activities, and new resources on there. And if you want to learn more about how the innovation cycle is similar to the nursing process, or learn more about the Nurse Hack for Health, I'm a contributor to the American Nurse online journal, part of their American Nurse Influencers program. And finally, if you want to be inspired by other nurses doing amazing things in innovation, science, and policy, please check out our Amplify Nursing podcast. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or wherever you do your podcast listening. And I was privileged to be able to interview my friend and colleague and one of our co-organizers for the Nurse Hack for Health, Hiem Nadel, for this season 3 of the Amplify Nursing podcast. So I highly recommend checking that out. And with that, I am always available for questions. Please reach out if I can help in any way. Good luck and have fun.